under the influence of the device. He said he seemed to have no control over the answers. The CIA sanctioned mind control study. The story becomes even more interesting, and I'm not really getting any of these words in, sorry guys. The story becomes even more interesting when it is noted that Dr. Addy's work with the LIDA machine was funded by none other than Dr. Eldon Bird, neuroelectromagnetic researcher under contract to the U.S. Navy. Bird stated that the LIDA machine was made in the 1950s by the Soviets. The CIA purchased one through a Canadian front for Dr. Ross Addy, but didn't give him any funds to evaluate it. I provided those funds for my project in 1981. It says I provided those funds for my project in 1981. And he determined that the LIDA would put rabbits into a stupor at a distance and make cats go into REM. This immediately reveals the role of the CIA in its acquisition, who via a series of fronts distanced themselves from the actual operation and the testing of the tool, plausible deniability, which we know a lot about, the compartmentalized experimentation of so many American citizens, from direct energy weapon systems, and all around, and citizens around the world. This is a really great article. I'm going to go ahead and finish it. We note that these experiments occurred in the 1980s, post the 1970 congressional hearings, when allegedly such research had been stopped. In private correspondence, Einhorn told me that his friend Andrija Puharich, who very much like Addy intermittently worked for the CIA in the same field, built a small version of the device and tested it, with permission, on the inner group. Mind control effects were produced, and he tested it without permission in crowded, buzzing restaurants. Result: there was a rapid diminution of the buzz, which returned as soon as the machine was turned off. Whereas the CIA were officially asking what had happened to the device since the 1950s, and noting that the Soviets could have miniaturized it since, another question could be whether they had rolled it out on a grander scale. And it is definitely a curious coincidence that a similar signal was indeed beamed out by the Russians and heard practically all over the Western world. As to the allegation that the Russians had used some of Nikola Tesla's innovative technologies to accomplish such a goal, Dr. Gordon MacDonald of Dartmouth College, an internationally known geophysicist and astrophysicist, had outlined a concept in which enhanced electrical oscillations in the Earth's atmosphere might be used to impair human brains. He said research indicates that weak oscillating electrical fields can influence the brain, causing small but measurable reduction in the person's performance. Lightning research has shown that it might be possible to control lightning to create such low-frequency oscillations in the ionosphere. In short, by 1984, the CIA was fully aware of the possibility to apply the woodpecker on an individual or global scale, and it must have left some CIA employees to query whether this wasn't indeed the true purpose of the Russian woodpecker. Indeed, according to Ira Einhorn, who had infrequent contacts with the world of American intelligence, even by late 1970s, there was unconfirmed speculation that the woodpecker was more than it seemed, and used for precisely that purpose. A blueprint for global mind control. The all-important question is why the Soviets would want to beam a brainwashing signal to the West. Apart from the obvious and logical answer, it was Walter Boert who, in his revised and updated edition of his classic Operation Mind Control, tackled a then-emerging trend, the move away from traditional means of warfare to non-lethal warfare, in which technology such as ELF waves, microwaves, and other forms of electromagnetic manipulation were the new rage. It was, of course, a trend that Alan Dulles had predicted. Dr. Andrew McCrowski focused on this. Alan Dulles had predicted. Dr. Andrew McCrowski focused on this area too, at the time stating that the Soviets are on the verge of a breakthrough into a new weapons technology that will make missiles and bombers obsolete. They could induce panic or illness into whole nations. In short, Dulles' 1953 prediction by the late 1970s seemed to have been realized. Indeed, Addy's toying with LIDA or the Russians building a giant LIDA near Chernobyl are not one-offs. Since the 1984 report about his involvement with LIDA, Dr. Ross Addy's name has become more firmly linked with mind control experiments. Unsurprisingly, the work he performed largely coincides with the work he did on LIDA, researching specific behavior modifications by electromagnetic means, as well as inducing calcium efflux events to interfere with brain function, the so-called confusion weaponry. In 1976, Time magazine reported that Washington had known for some 15 years that its Moscow embassy had been bombarded with microwaves. The purpose was to jam the sophisticated electronic monitoring devices inside and on the roof of the building, but the State Department decided to launch a medical investigation of the thousands of U.S. diplomats and their families who served in Moscow since the early 1960s. In the wake of microwave disclosures, former embassy employees and their families recalled suffering strange ailments during their tenure in Moscow, ranging from eye tics and headaches to heavy menstrual flows. Some pointed out that former ambassadors to Moscow Charles Bolin and Llewellyn Thompson both died of cancer, though an official link between the cancer and the microwave bombardments was never confirmed. The end of an era. And this is a picture of Ira Einhorn right there. At the end of the Cold War, the signal was turned off, and NATO accepted the official Soviet explanation that the signal had been an unfortunate byproduct of Russia's ABM system. There are possibly good reasons why the U.S., whether in 1989 or 1978, when Einhorn made his allegations, wanted to keep the controversy low-key. Jerry Smith had argued that in 1977, the U.S. government sold the Soviets a super magnet, knowing that it was going to become part of the Woodpecker program. This magnet was a 40-ton monster capable of generating a magnetic field 250,000 times more powerful than that of Earth's magnetic field. The United States not only knew what it was for, they sent a team of scientists to help the Russians install it. The team installed the magnet at the Gomel site, which was near and powered by the Chernobyl reactor, which in 1986 became the focus of a nuclear tragedy. There has been speculation whether the highly unlikely scenario from this tragedy, blamed as usual on bad design and maintenance, might have been linked to the nearby woodpecker. So far, nothing beyond speculation has been put forward. Well, that's interesting, because I was thinking it had nothing to do with frequencies being bombarded at it. The big question today is not whether the Russian woodpecker could have been. Today it is no longer a question whether the woodpeckers would have been able to, or whether Einhorn's claims were outrageous or dead right. Today the question is whether the woodpecker was coincidentally a signal that corresponded with known brainwashing frequencies, or whether it was purposefully designed as a brainwashing wave. In this scenario, allegations by Dr. Andrew Mikrowski that the Soviets are on the verge of a breakthrough into a new weapons technology that will make missiles and bombers obsolete, they could induce panic or illness into whole nations, are more than intriguing scenarios to ponder. Should anyone dare to subject the history of Western world between 1976 and 1989 to an analysis, might they find potential incidents in which panic or illness changed the course of history? Probably the biggest question to ponder is this. Nothing the allegation made by several qualified scientists that missiles or bombers would soon be obsolete. Is it a chronological coincidence that the end of the Cold War occurred when more and more discussion about the woodpecker began to appear in the Western media? Is it a coincidence that once the Cold War ended, the signal was turned off? Was it no longer necessary? The unthinkable question is whether the woodpecker was indeed a form of non-lethal warfare that literally eased Western minds, zapped them with smoothing waves into believing or accepting that there was no such thing as a communist threat, paving the way for the end of the Cold War. Wow. Scattered thinking. The question is so big it will never receive a satisfactory answer. Some, including Judge Mazzola, will state that it is unscientific to even pose the very question, but interestingly, Francis Crick's book, The Astonishing Hypothesis, The Scientific Search for the Soul, published in 1994, mapped Crick's foray into the neural correlates of consciousness, NCC, an approach which suggests that consciousness is operated from a neuronal level, and that tinkering with neurons will therefore bring changes to consciousness. Crick, coincidentally the co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, stated that 40 megahertz wave was instrumental in our perception of reality. Most NCC studies and hence experiments focus on vision as a means of manipulating the perception of time and space. Though ideal for laboratory experiments, in the shadowy regions in which intelligence agencies operate, where NCC was not studied for purely scientific advances but for military applications, sound would obviously have been a more preferable method. Sound travels further and easier than visual displays, which require line of sight. And that the woodpecker traveled far and strong was in evidence when most of the Western world complained about it to the Soviets. Whether coincidence or design, whether it deliberately, accidentally, or not all modified our brain, are questions that will forever hang over the woodpecker. In the field of electronic harassment, whether the Moscow or woodpecker signal, the U.S. government has shown a general unwillingness to openly investigate. But it is clear that the woodpecker was not the lone delusion of Ira Einhorn, but widely supported by all of those who investigated the signal and or had inroads into the world of American intelligence. In the end, the importance of the Russian woodpecker is that even if it wasn't, all the information is there to realize it could have been, and that in itself it's intriguing enough, and begs the question why all of the above is not better known. That's a really good article, kind of tying a lot of technologies, psychotronic technologies together, in the question of, I believe that the woodpecker did exist, and I think that it was, emitting frequencies that, they were trying to do mind control experiments with. But this article brings up a lot of the incidents that happened with this technology. And to think that the U.S. was involved in giving them a huge, magnet for the woodpecker, cooperating with their experimentation, that is scary. But it goes along with how there is cooperation in this targeted individual experimentation or experimentation with directed energy weapon systems, because if I were to go to Russia today, just leave, get on a plane and go to Russia, I would still be targeted by directed energy weapon systems. So there's a cooperation among countries on a certain level, and then I think some of the more advanced things that they're learning about directed energy weapon systems as they're testing it. There's probably a lot of testing is already done, but they're still trying to get data, on the brain and everything like that. And some of that more advanced, more of the advanced data is kept and held by those individual countries, kind of in a basically a weapons race, a weapons race. That's a great article. I'm gonna put it in. I'm gonna put it in the comments, and I just wanted to show another example of this technology being used in recent history. It's all throughout our history, and then it's like since the 1980s, people have been very, very hush hush about it, only talking about I can't think right now. The active denial system, certain things that are, the Department of Defense is letting out, but what they're doing, further in the shadows, is covered up because they're trying to advance this technology, and they're trying to find out what the limits of it are in controlling the mind and learning more about the mind. So we need to get this technology out into the open, guys. This was just another article of this kind of technology being shown throughout our recent history to exist, kind of laying a groundwork. Getting to about 30 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But I will put the link for this article in the comments, and let's keep getting information out there, guys. The November video marathon is going strong, and I will see you guys tomorrow.